There were 4 or 5 unmistakable allusions to them on the witchcraft trial records, as when one Hepzibah Lawson swore on July 10th, 1692, at the court of Oyer and Termenen, under Judge Hawthorne, that 40 witches and the black man were wont to meet in the woods behind Mr. Hutchinson's house, and one Amity how declared at a session of August 8th before Judge Gedney that Mr. C.B. George Burroughs on that night put the devil his mark upon Bridget S., Jonathan A., Simon O., Deliverance W., Joseph C., Susan P., Mehetable C., and Deborah B., when there was a catalogue of Hutchinson's uncanny library, as found after his disappearance, and an unfinished manuscript in his handwriting, couched in a cipher none could read. Ward had a photostatic copy of this manuscript made, and began to work casually on the cipher as soon as it was delivered to him. After the following August, his labors on the cipher became intense and feverish, and there is a reason to believe from his speech and conduct that he hit upon the key before October or November. He never stated, though, whether or not he had succeeded, but of greatest immediate interest was the ornate material. It took Ward only a short time to prove from identity of penmanship, a thing that he had already considered established from the text of the letter to Kerwin, namely that Simon Orne and his supposed son were one and the same person, as Orne had said to his correspondent, it was hardly safe to live too long in Salem. Hence he resorted to a 30-year sojourn abroad, and did not return to claim his lands except as a representative of a new generation. Orne had apparently been careful to destroy most of his correspondence, but the citizens who took action in 1771 found and preserved a few letters and papers which excited their wonder. There were cryptic formulae and diagrams in his and other hands, which Ward now either copied with care or had photographed, and one extremely mysterious letter in a chirography that the searcher recognized from items in the Registry of Deeds as positively Joseph Kerwin's. This Kerwin letter, though undated as to the year, was evidently not the one in answer to which Orne had written the confiscated missive, and from internal evidence Ward placed it not much later than 1750. It may not be amiss to give this text in full as a sample of the style of one whose history was so dark and terrible. The receipt is addressed as Simon, but a line, whether drawn by Kerwin or Orne, Ward could not tell, is run through the ward, Providence, 1 May, the 1st May. And, okay, there was a guy in China said to live a couple hundred years, 250, how old did he live? And they proved he outlived his sons, genetic tests and that sort of stuff. So it wasn't sons claiming grandfathers, but this is a way that a person could possibly get away with that if it were to happen. And it said there's people who've lived even longer, so we don't really know the limit. It's certainly been proved in respect of somebody who was 141 when he died. Looked like a living mummy, he did. So some of this stuff about people not appearing to age, that's questionable. Aging slower, that's different. Brother, my honored antient friend, due respects and earnest wishes to him whom we serve, for your eternal power. I am just come up upon that which you ought to know concerning the matter of lasty extremity, and what to do regard yet I am not disposed to follow you, and going away on account of my years, but Providence hath not ye sharpness of ye bay, in hunting out uncommon things and bringing to trial. I'm tied up in ships and goods, and could not do as you did. Besides the which, my farm at Patuxet hath under it that ye know, and that would not wait for my coming back as another. But I am not unready for hardy fortunes, as I have told you. I have long worked upon your way, upon your way of getting backy after ye lost. I last night struck on ye words that bring up ye Yaga Sothotha, and saw for ye first time that face spoke of by Ibn Shakabak in ye, and it said that ye third psalm in ye Liber Damnatus holds ye clavicle with Sunna in the house, Saturn in trine, draw ye pentagram of fire, and saith ye 9 verse thrice. This verse repeat each Rudimas and Hallows Eve, and ye thing will breed in ye outside spheres. And of ye seed of old shall one be born who shall look back, though knowing not what he seeks, yet with this await nothing, if there be no error, and if the salts are the way to make the salts, be not ready for his hands. And here I will own, I have not taken needed steps, nor found much. Ye process is in playing hard to come near, and it uses up such a store of specimens. I am hard put it to get enough, notwithstanding the sailors have come from the Indies, yet people about are become curious, and I cannot stand them off. Ye gentry are worse than the populace, beg more circumstantial in their acts, and more believed in what they tell. That parson and Mr. Merritt have talked some. I am fearful, but no thing so far is dangerous. Ye chemical substance are easy of getting. There beg 2 good chemists in town, Dr. Bowen and Sam Carroll. I am falling out. I'm following out what Borellus saith, and hath help in Abdul al-Hazred in his 7th book. Whatever I get, ye shall have, and in ye means well, do not neglect to make use of ye words I have given. I have them right, but if ye desire to see him, employ the writings on ye piece of that I am putting in this packet. Say ye verses, every Rudemas and Hallows Eve. And if your line runs not out, one shall be in years to come that shall look back and use what salts or stuff for salts. Ye shall leave him. Job 14:14. I rejoice you are again at Salem, and I hope I may see you not long hence. I have a good stallion, and I'm thinking of getting a coach, and there beg one Mr. Merritt's in Providence already, though ye roads are bad, and if you are disposed to travel, do not pass me by. From Boston, take ye post road through Detom Wrentham, and Attleborough, good taverns, beg at all these towns, stop at Mr. Bolcomb's inn, Wrentham, where ye beds are finer than Mr. Hatch's, but eat ye at ye other houses, for that their cook is better. Turn into Providence by Pawtucket Falls, and ye rode past Mr. Saley's tavern. My house opt Mr. Ebenetus Olney's tavern. Off ye Town Street, first on ye north side of Olney's Court, distance from Boston's store about 44 miles. Sir, I'm your old and true friend and servant in Almondsith Metroton. Joseph C. to Mr. Simon Orne, Williams Lane in Salem. Now, one of the things about some of the content that you're going to see on this channel, or I would hope that people just don't watch one video and moved on to another thing, or perhaps they find better somebody who's done it better on some other channel. That's my hope too, or something. But because my channel's not really about me and attention for me. If I can get you to another somewhere else to continue your studies or actions or devotions or whatnot. But some of my material, the verses and other such that are used in it, well, your own intentions, your own uses can be there. I'm well aware that what I do, live rituals, seasonals, whatever, these things are things that people, they may use them such as this. So you can't tell on the outside, someone's reciting Psalms or some other scripture, what's really going on. But they're using it, so just, leave it be. This letter, oddly enough, was what first gave Ward the exact location of Kerwin's Providence home, for none of the records encountered up to that time had been at all specific. The discovery was doubly striking because it indicated as the newer Kerwin house, built in 1761 on the site of the old, a dilapidated building still standing in Olney Court, and well known to Ward in his antiquarian rambles over Stamper's Hill. The place was indeed only a few squares from his own home on the Great Hills, higher ground, and was now the abode of a Negro family much esteemed for occasional washing, house cleaning, and furnace tending services. To find in distant Salem such sudden proof of the significance of this familiar rookery in his own family history was highly impressive of a thing to Ward, and he resolved to explore the place immediately upon his return. The more mystical phases of the letter, which he took to be some extravagant kind of symbolism, briefly baffled him, though he noted with a thrill of curiosity that the biblical passage referred to, Job 14:14, was the familiar verse, "If a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time I will wait till my change come." Part 2. Young Ward came home in a state of pleasant excitement and spent the following Saturday in a long, exhaustive study of the house of Olney Court. The place, now crumbling with age, had never been a mansion, but was a modest 2.5-story wooden townhouse of the familiar Provence colonial type, with a plain, peaked roof, large central chimney, an artistically carved doorway with rayed fanlight, triangular pediment, and trim Doric pilasters. It had suffered but little alteration externally, and Ward felt he was gazing on something very close to the sinister matters of his quest. The present Negro inhabitants were known to him, and he was very courteously shown about the interior of old Asa and his stout wife, Hannah. Here there was more change than the outside indicated, and Ward saw with regret that fully half of the fine scroll and urn, overmantels, and shell-carved cupboard linings were gone, while much of the fine wainscoting and Bollectian molding was marked, hacked, gouged, or covered up altogether with cheap wallpaper. In general, the survey did not yield as much as Ward had somehow expected, but it was at least expecting to stand within the ancestral walls which had housed such a man of horror as Joseph Curwen. He saw with a thrill that a monogram had been very carefully effaced from the ancient brass knocker. From then until after the close of the school, Ward spent his time on the photostatic copy of the Hutchinson cipher and the accumulation of local Curwen data. The former still proved unyielding, but of the latter he obtained so much and many clues to similar data elsewhere that he was ready to make a trip to New London and New York to consult old letters whose presence in those parts were indicated. This trip was very fruitful, for it brought him the Fenner letters with their terrible description of the Pawtuxet farmhouse raid, and the Nightingale Talbot letters, in which he learned of the portrait painted on a panel of the Curwen library. This matter of the portrait interested him particularly, since he would have given much to know what Joseph Curwen looked like, and he decided to make a second search of the house in Olney Court to see if there might not be some trace of the ancient features beneath the peeling coats of later paint or layers of moldy wallpaper. Early in August, that search took place, and Ward went carefully over the walls of every room sizable enough to have been by any possibility of the library of the evil builder. He paid especial attention to the large panels of such overmantels as still remained, and was keenly excited after about an hour, when, on a broad area above the fireplace, in a spacious ground floor room, he became certain that the surface brought out by the peeling of several coats of paint was sensibly darker than any ordinary interior paint on the wood beneath it was likely to have been. A few more careful tests with a thin knife, and he knew that he had come upon an oil portrait of great extent. With truly scholarly restraint, the youth did not risk the damage which an immediate attempt to uncover the hidden picture with the knife might have done, but just retired from the scene of his discovery to enlist expert help. In 3 days he returned with an artist of long experience, Mr. Walter Dwight, whose studio is near the foot of College Hill, and that accomplished restorer of paintings set to work at once with his proper methods and chemical substances. Old Asa and his wife were duly excited over their strange visitors and were properly reimbursed for this invasion of their domestic hearth. As day by day the work of restoration progressed, Charles Ward looked on with growing interest at the lines and shades gradually unveiled after their long oblivion. Dwight had begun at the bottom. Hence, since the picture was a 3/4 length one, the face did not come out for some time. It was meanwhile seen that the subject was a spare, well-shaped man with a dark blue coat, embroidered waistcoat, black satin smallclothes, and white silk stockings, seated in a carved chair against the background of a window with wharves and ships beyond. When the head came out, it was observed to bear a neat Albemarle wig, and to possess a thin, calm, undistinguished face which seemed somewhat familiar to both Ward and the artist. Only at the very last, though, did the restorer and his client begin to gasp with astonishment at the details of that lean, pallid visage, and recognize, with a touch of awe, the dramatic trick which heredity had played. For it took the final bath of oil and the final stroke of the delicate scraper to bring out fully the expression which centuries had hidden, and to confront the bewildered Charles Dexter Ward, dweller in the past, with his own living features in the countenance of his horrible great-great-great-grandfather. Ward brought his parents to see the marvel he had uncovered, and his father at once determined to purchase the picture, despite its execution on stationery paneling. The resemblance to the boy, despite the appearance of rather greater age, was marvelous, and it could be seen through some trick atavism. The physical contours of Joseph Curwen had found precise duplication after a century and a half. Miss Ward's resemblance to her ancestor was not at all marked, though she could recall relatives who had some of the facial characteristics shared by her son. And by the bygone Curwen, she did not relish the discovery, and told her husband that he had better burn the picture instead of bringing it home. There was, she averted, something unwholesome about it, not only intrinsically, but in its very resemblance to Charles. Mr. Ward, however, was a practical man of power and affairs, a cotton manufacturer, with extensive mills at River Point and the Pawtuxet Valley, and not one to listen to feminine scruples. The picture impressed him mightily with its likeness to his son, and he believed that the boy deserved it as a present. In this opinion, it is needless to say, Charles most heartily concurred, and a few days later Mr. Ward located the owner of the house and a small rodent-featured person with a guttural accent, and obtained the whole mantle and overmantle bearing the picture at a curtly fixed price, which cut short the impending torrent of unctuous haggling. I was at a conference where some guy compared his wife to a squirrel, and it wasn't. It didn't seem insulting the way it was done at all, and it didn't seem like she took it as an insult. Well, I mean, her appearance, you know. It now remained to take off the paneling and remove it to the Ward home, where provisions were made for its thorough restoration. An installation with electric or mock fireplace in Charles' third-floor study library. To Charles was left the task of superintending this removal, and on the 28th of August he accompanied 2 expert workmen from the Crooker decorating firm to the house in Olney Court, where the mantle and portrait-bearing overmantle were detached with great care and precision for transportation in the company's motor truck. There was left a space of exposed brickwork, marking the chimney course, and this young Ward observed a cubical recess of about a foot square, which must have lain directly behind the head of the portrait. Curious as to what such a space might mean or contain, the youth approached and looked within, finding beneath the deep coatings of dust and soot some loose, yellowed papers, a crude, thick copybook, and a few moldering textile shreds, which may have formed the ribbon binding the rest together. Blowing away the bulk of the dirt and cinders, he took up the book and looked at the bold inscription on its cover. It was in a hand which he had learned to recognize at the Essex Institute, and proclaimed the volume as the journal and notes of Joseph Curwen, gentleman of Province, plantations, late of Salem. Excited beyond measure by his discovery, Ward showed the book to the 2 curious workmen beside him. Their testimony is absolute as to the nature and genuineness of the finding, and Dr. Willett relies on them to help establish his theory that the youth was not really mad when he began his mere eccentricities. All the other papers were likewise in Curwen's handwriting, and one of them seemed especially portentous because of its inscription, "To him who shall come after, and how he may get beyond time and ye spheres." And another was in a cipher the same. Ward hoped, as the Hutchinson cipher, which had hitherto baffled him, a third, and here the searcher rejoiced, seemed to be a key to the cipher, whilst the 4th and 5th were addressed, respectively, to Edward Hutchinson, Armiger, and the Jedediah Orne, Esquire. R, their heir or heirs, R to those representing them, The sixth and last was inscribed, Joseph Curwen, his life and travels, Betten ye years 1678 and 1687, awhither he voyaged, where he stayed, whom he saw, and what he learnt.